You and Blake can be married for?
Oh God, don't do this to me. 4 years. First, well, I was obsessed with this girl, Fiona Gorczynski. She used to take the bus the opposite way of my actual home, and I would get on the bus just to sit next to her.
Wow.
For 45 minutes the wrong way. I love it when you're young, it's so cute. When you're older, it's just stalking.
The first and most important rule I was ever taught as an independent journalist, a public figure, and someone who has sat across from narcissists in court is simple. Don't take the bait. Stay calm, stay measured, and stay above board. Because the moment you react, the moment you slip, a narcissist will twist your words, distort your actions, and weaponize them against you. Over time, their fabricated narrative can begin to seep into the courtroom's atmosphere. Judges, clerks, even observers can start to absorb the repetition, slowly accepting the idea that you are the volatile, dangerous one simply because they've heard it enough. And that's exactly what we're watching unfold with Blake Lively. Through her filings, she has been methodically constructing a carefully curated story, one in which Brian Friedman, Wayfair, Justin Baldoni, and nearly every party involved are painted as threatening, abusive, manipulative, or harmful. It's a classic strategy. Overwhelm the legal record with dramatic accusations, hoping that the quantity, not the truth, shapes perception. Blake isn't just defending herself. She's rewriting the entire narrative so that anyone who challenges her becomes part of a villainous ensemble cast in her courtroom thriller. Blake has been positioning herself as the ultimate victim, insisting that everything unfolding online is a direct result of these individuals targeting her. In her telling, their lawsuit isn't a legitimate response or a defense of their own reputations, it's retaliation. She frames even their basic right to push back, to defend themselves as an attack on her. According to her narrative, every filing, every response, every attempt to correct the record is harm, weaponizing the docket against her fragile innocence. And because of the speed of the litigation, the aggressive strategy, and the staggering resources behind her, it's clear she is not operating alone. The financial firepower seems limitless, almost as if there's no amount of money Ryan Reynolds isn't prepared to burn right now in order to obliterate anyone he believes has crossed him. Blake has become the perfect instrument in his arsenal, the public-facing shield for a legal war that doesn't even feel like hers. In my opinion, this lawsuit barely belongs to her at all. She's the face, the figurehead, the sympathetic rapper. But the engine powering this entire crusade? That's Ryan. And when you're on the receiving end of a psychopathic narcissist, or worse, a narcissistic duo operating as one, you will stumble. You will make mistakes. Because you're dealing with people who don't just escalate, they weaponize escalation. They bait you, corner you, and exploit every human slip as proof that their twisted story was right all along. When you're being hunted by a narcissist, you will falter. It's inevitable. And throughout this litigation, every minor slip, every harmless procedural misstep from Wayfair has been seized upon instantly. Blake's team pounces on the tiniest error, magnifies it, dramatizes it, and marches it straight to the judge as proof of misconduct. And predictably, the judge scolds Wayfair for technicalities that would barely register in a normal case. It's a strategy of exhaustion. Drown the other side in blame until they can't breathe. Meanwhile, Wayfair's posture has remained painfully defensive. They hold back. They don't pursue sanctions. They don't push for disciplinary measures. They choose restraint every time, even when they'd be justified in fighting back hard. It's as if they're trapped in survival mode, constantly dodging punches but never throwing any. And the truth is, if they were willing to be more aggressive, if they matched Blake and Ryan's intensity, they could just as easily have Miss Lively facing her own disciplinary hearings. The evidence exists, the grounds exist, and the misconduct is not one-sided. But that's the imbalance when you're up against a well-funded narcissistic machine. One side weaponizes every breath you take, while the other is too busy trying not to drown to realize they're allowed to swing back. Wayfair could, at any point, move to have Blake Lively's motions sanctioned or struck. The procedural grounds are there. The misrepresentations are there. The excess is there. But they're not doing it. They're not striking anything, not challenging the theatrics, not meeting fire with fire. And that restraint, whether strategic or emotional, creates a massive imbalance in the courtroom. Part of this hesitancy seems rooted in Justin Baldoni's nature. He has always taken a passive, almost painfully gentle approach to conflict. He doesn't want to fight back. He doesn't want to escalate. He doesn't want to be aggressive, even when aggression is justified. His do no harm philosophy, baked deeply into his worldview and his faith, becomes a double-edged sword. It keeps him morally aligned, but legally exposed. While Blake and Ryan operate like a tactical strike team, Justin shows up with compassion, patience, and the quiet hope that truth will simply reveal itself. But in litigation, especially litigation driven by narcissism, truth doesn't reveal itself. It has to be dragged into the light. And Justin's instinct to avoid harming others, even those actively harming him, leaves Wayfair fighting with their arms tied behind their backs. All three of the individuals caught in this litigation share a similar kind of faith, a moral compass that resists aggression. None of them want to be the ones who strike first, who retaliate, or who weaponize the system the way Blake does. But that restraint becomes dangerous, because any moment they appear to be the aggressor, even by accident, Blake pounces instantly. She turns the smallest hint of assertiveness into a full-blown narrative of persecution. It's her pattern. Twist their decency into malice, their defense into attack, their caution into guilt. And as I mentioned earlier this week, I wasn't surprised at all when I saw the possibility that the judge might strike the deposition transcript. Truthfully, the entire transcript never belonged in the record to begin with. It was rushed, sloppily timed, and filed in a way that made it extremely vulnerable to challenge. In a normal case, a judge might overlook the rough edges. But in this case, one where Blake's legal team is hunting for every technical weakness, they knew exactly how to weaponize it. When you're in a courtroom war with someone who thrives on manipulation, even your honesty can become a liability. And the people on the receiving end, especially those who hold tightly to their values, become easy targets for someone who sees morality as a tool rather than a principle. The transcript didn't even need to be uploaded in the first place. Honestly, in all the years I followed litigation, I have never seen an entire deposition transcript dumped into the record. It's simply not how things are done. Typically, when a motion references something said in a deposition, you attach only the specific pages you need. 2 or 3 pages, maybe a short excerpt, maybe a section that directly supports your argument. That's it. You cite what's relevant and leave the rest out. But uploading the entire transcript as an exhibit, that's practically unheard of. It's excessive, it's unusual, and it immediately opens the door to procedural problems. It gives the opposing side far more grounds to challenge it, pick at it, and ask the court to strike it completely. And in a case like this, where Blake's team treats every technical opportunity as ammunition, that kind of misstep becomes a gift-wrapped advantage. In a calmer, more balanced lawsuit, a judge might simply overlook it as an over-enthusiastic filing choice. But here, every deviation from protocol becomes a weapon, and every irregularity becomes an attack point. And that's exactly why striking the transcript was predictable. It wasn't the content that doomed it, it was the way it was filed. So when I said I wouldn't be surprised if the judge struck the transcript and that Wayfair would end up having to refile only the 2 relevant pages they actually needed, that's exactly what happened. The judge agreed. The full transcript was struck from the record, and Wayfair was instructed to refile the limited excerpt they actually needed. But what made the ruling even more alarming was the language the court used. The judge stated that Wayfair now has a history of using the docket to abuse Blake Lively, framing her again as the wounded, fragile victim in need of protection. This is the danger when dealing with a narcissistic narrative machine. Even the normal act of filing a document, a standard procedural step, gets reframed as harassment. And the more Blake positions herself as the persecuted party, the more the court begins to absorb that narrative. It's repetition as strategy, familiarity as persuasion. And this is where the concept of reactive abuse comes into play. It's a psychological phenomenon that narcissists rely on. They provoke, poke, and manipulate until the other person finally reacts, and then they point to that reaction as proof of abuse. They create the chaos, then weaponize your response to it. In a legal setting, this becomes incredibly dangerous because every defensive maneuver you take becomes part of their evidence. Every attempt to correct the record becomes harm. Every procedural mistake becomes abuse. Blake isn't just fighting a lawsuit. She's crafting a story. And one courtroom ruling at a time, we're watching that story seep into the official record. This is exactly what reactive abuse looks like. When someone is pushed, cornered, provoked, and antagonized long enough, they eventually snap or make a small mistake. And I've seen this happen repeatedly with Wayfair. They get pushed and pushed and pushed, cornered into a position where they finally take some sort of defensive action, and the moment they do, Blake and Ryan leap on it like they've been lying in wait. They want that slip. They're counting on it. It becomes their opportunity to twist the narrative and parade it in front of the court as proof that they are the real victims. Because Blake and Ryan aren't operating from a baseline of do no harm. They're not approaching this with gentleness, restraint, or spiritual morality. They're operating from a baseline of strategic harm.
Reflect the full context of the dispute. Now, suddenly, he's contradicting his own logic. He's circumventing the very principles he previously laid out, reversing his own language and ruling directly against what he had earlier established as the standard. It's a jarring pivot, one that reinforces how deeply Blake's victim narrative has seeped into the court's perception. Instead of consistent judicial reasoning, we're watching the court bend, reshape, and retract its own words in ways that increasingly favor her. When a judge starts ruling against his own precedent within the same case, it doesn't just reflect a legal decision. It reflects influence, pressure, and a shifting emotional landscape inside the courtroom. The court emphasized that it must protect the judicial process from being co-opted. Its role is to ensure that the docket isn't misused to gratify private spite or to promote public scandal. In other words, the integrity of the courtroom cannot be sacrificed to settle personal vendettas or to feed a narrative for social media or public consumption. In this case, the attachment of the entire 300-page deposition, when only 2 pages were actually cited in the letter, served no legitimate litigation purpose. It was excessive, unnecessary, and arguably manipulative. Instead of advancing the facts, it created a spectacle, allowing a private dispute to masquerade as public theater. The court recognized this and acted to preserve the orderly administration of justice. By striking the full transcript, the judge reinforced the principle that procedure and fairness must trump drama. The attachment wasn't just a clerical misstep, it was a tool that could have been used to distort the record, and the court's intervention was a clear statement that such tactics would not stand. The court concluded that the inclusion of the entire deposition appeared to have been intended to burden Blake Lively. By filing the entire transcript, the Wayfair parties risked inviting public speculation and scandal, even if the small portions they cited might have been relevant, which is far from certain. What's striking is that Wayfair never even attempted to argue that the full 292 or 300-page transcript was necessary or relevant. And frankly, they couldn't. There was no justification for it. In my experience, attaching an entire deposition is virtually unheard of. The standard practice is to include only the pages that are actually cited. The court's reasoning was clear. The sheer volume of irrelevant material created a scenario in which Blake's team could then respond by requesting continued sealing of certain portions. That response could, in turn, be leveraged by Wayfair, or misrepresented by them, for public relations purposes, turning a procedural step into a weapon in the court of public opinion. In other words, the filing had the potential to escalate drama outside the courtroom while providing little to no legitimate support for their legal arguments. Because of this, the court emphasized that it has not just the power, but the responsibility to step in and maintain control over the judicial process. The judge recognized that allowing irrelevant or excessive filings to remain unchecked could distort the record, compromise fairness, and give one side an outsized advantage in shaping public perception. Essentially, he signaled that procedural decorum cannot be sacrificed even when high-profile parties are involved. The judge goes on to say that Wayfair's filing strategy appears designed to set Blake up so that when she inevitably argues she doesn't want her testimony made public, Wayfair could claim she's afraid of the truth. He states that their responses are now becoming unpersuasive because this pattern keeps repeating. According to him, their actions fit a broader trend of using docket filings as an opportunity to litigate the case in the press rather than in the courtroom. He even notes that the court has already struck prior Wayfair filings for the improper purpose of inviting public uproar. The judge highlights that he has likewise disregarded attachments in other filings that served no legitimate litigation purpose. Wayfair insists that the deposition transcript itself is not abusive, but the judge clarifies that the concern isn't whether the content is abusive, but whether the filing of it was abusive or improper. And to him, the issue is that it was irrelevant, unnecessary, and clearly outside normal procedure. He emphasizes that it is not routine, in fact, highly unusual, for a party to attach an entire confidential deposition transcript when they are only citing a few lines. Doing so unnecessarily burdens the court and forces the opposing side to justify why the entire transcript should remain sealed. As a result, the judge unradicted the one single sentence Blake said, and then struck the entire deposition from the docket. And here's the part that's maddening. I still don't understand what Wayfair's justification was for filing the whole transcript. Maybe they thought it was fair game after Blake dumped over 2,000 pages of material on them in her motions to compel. But even if that's the case, Wayfair never pushes back. They never tell the court, this is absurd, this is excessive, this is harassment by paperwork. They don't ask for strikes, they don't demand sanctions, they just quietly accept it, passively, while Blake's legal team plays aggressively, ruthlessly, and without hesitation. So what did Blake actually say in that deposition? According to the unredacted line, under questioning by Friedman, she admitted that the only ongoing smear campaign she personally knows about is the retaliatory lawsuit itself and the press statements that Friedman and his team have made about her character. That's it. One vague sentence. And somehow this single, unsubstantiated belief has been inflated into a full-blown narrative of persecution. It is incredibly difficult to litigate against someone like Blake. It is exhausting on every level, emotionally, mentally, ethically. She will drag you into psychological warfare. She will force you into corners. She will twist every interaction until you look like the villain. And this doesn't only take a toll on the plaintiffs and defendants, it crushes the lawyers too. The gamesmanship, the manipulation, the constant gaslighting coming from her attorneys cannot be overstated. I've watched my own legal team go through this kind of abuse, and I know exactly what the people in this case are enduring. When opposing counsel refuses to cooperate, refuses to negotiate in good faith, and instead operates with a my way or else mentality, it becomes a toxic, draining, damaging experience for everyone involved. And everyone who has had to deal with Blake's attorneys in this litigation is having the same experience. So at this point, I can only imagine how exhausted Wayfair must be. Fatigued, maligned, and relentlessly pushed to the brink by a legal team that thrives on chaos and narrative manipulation. Wayfair and others involved are constantly being scrutinized and disparaged in the press. Blake, meanwhile, is using the docket strategically to file disparaging and abusive motions, yet no one is asking for her filings to be struck. It's a one-sided game. She plays aggressively, weaponizing both the court and the public narrative, while the other side remains largely defensive and restrained. I even